Yeah, veterans have become a really important piece of the clients that we serve. And, we all know veterans, whether it's family members, whether we ourselves have served. We know that veterans, 1 in 5, struggle with mental illness as well. And so when you think about people who have enlisted and spent time, put their life on the line for our country so that we have the freedom to be able to be who we are and do what we do. Now coming home, there was a time where veterans were not welcomed with open arms. And there was a time where we didn't talk about what had gone on, whether folks were deployed, whether they were here and stateside. Now we're in a spot where we're talking a little differently about how to support not only veterans, but their families, because we understand the importance of talking about things. And that doesn't mean that if there's a veteran who doesn't want to go back and relive their combat time, that's going to be something they have to do when they walk in the doors at For All Seasons. But what we are acknowledging is that it took place. And what we are acknowledging is that family members were impacted, veterans themselves were impacted, friends of veterans were impacted. And so our team has been working really hard to skill up our own cultural competency so that when a veteran walks through the door, when they're ready to say, I'd like to talk with someone, we not only have the space and capacity, but we also have the cultural competency to serve a really important population. When we think about veterans, we think about PTSD, or some people have said, drop the D, it's just PTS, so post-traumatic stress, that has been impacting. For a long time, it was looked at as a disease. If you look at the DSM-5 and you see it is classified as a disease, but what we're really focusing in on is the post-traumatic stress and how that has played out in the lives of our veterans community and in their families. And we are making progress because we're talking about it more. Just the nature of us having this conversation means that there's an awareness and we're not hiding it under a blanket. We're starting to discuss it in the community. We understand that depression and anxiety and PTS is a piece of what veterans are coming home with and or transitioning into life with. Even if someone has not been deployed, even if someone has not served overseas, there is still combat trauma that they're experiencing because they're supporting people who are, so you have your non-combat trauma and your combat trauma. And sometimes we only look at those that have traveled overseas, or we only look at folks who have been in combat, but you can also work with a veteran who worked in an office and was a part of hearing what was happening. And that post-traumatic stress is just as real for that individual. And so looking at the spectrum of age groups and who served where and how it impacted families is all something where I do believe we're making progress, because we're having these conversations and we're really addressing the needs in this immediate time and not, well, we'll get to it later. We have many partners in the community who work with our veterans. We work closely with the Veterans Administration, the local VAs. If there is not the ability for a veteran to be seen for mental health services, we don't have a wait list. And so sometimes there will be a referral to us. We work with VAMSA, the Veterans Administrative Alliance up in Stevensville, making sure that when they're encountering and working with veterans, we can get them in for services. We also are providing support groups with VAMSA and being able to sit side by side as folks are going through the process of understanding their benefits and maybe disability benefits, so that we're not just looking at one component of the veteran, we're really able to serve the entirety. And I think the other thing that makes us unique is we're not just reaching out to the veterans themselves. We have been able to also treat the spouse and the children and the stepchildren, because every family member is impacted. Even if it's the simple transition, and I say simple, but even if it's the transition of someone coming home from being deployed and being back in the home. If there's a family who's not used to having a partner or a spouse in the home, there's an adjustment period that goes on. So even just being able to say, what do you need to transition successfully, are conversations that we're having. Absolutely are. Part of what we're doing is we're working at the state level now. We're understanding the services at places like Walter Reed. We're connecting with the folks who are working there. We cannot take the place of Walter Reed by any stretch of the means here on the Eastern Shore. But what we can do is we can be working in partnership with, so that we can serve as a safe place for people to land when they're done with treatment at Walter Reed, and we're working with their doctors to understand the newest medicine, the newest technology. Our psychiatry team is plugged into lots of spaces across the state. We're working with our state legislators to make sure that funding is available. All of the pieces, looking at food insecurity and housing insecurity, all of these things matter for the veterans community.
Yeah.
And so we're really trying to create kind of a spider web so that, we're at the center alongside of these other organizations saying who needs what and how can we not necessarily provide it all, but how can we make the connectors so that veterans are taken care of.